Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Good. We had just got back from a nice long walk with my kids, and texted you, "Hey, I'm ready for the podcast now. We can record." And you had also just finished up some activity, so it was perfect timing for both of us.
Yes. My response, I believe, was, I just woke up from a chair nap. Give me 15 minutes. So both active.
Yes. It's all extremely on brand.
Yes, there you go. Hey, I just saw my phone here. Ohioans bought a record 437,507 gallons of liquor in the 7 days after Governor Mike DeWine ordered the bars and restaurants closed. How much of that, nearly 500,000, was you?
See, I'm on a health kick right now, so none was me. How many was from members of the Ohio State beat in general? Probably, I'm going to guess about 7%.
Yeah, that's a pretty good guess. Yeah, definitely. So props to everybody out there who is keeping the liquor stores in business, doing their part to be solid Americans and on-brand Ohioans. So thank you all for that. Today, Tom, I wanted to start off with something that kind of came a little bit out of nowhere. I was on the Mark Rogers show today with Kevin Noon from Buckeye Grove and Steve Hellwagon from Bucknuts, along with Mark Rogers. And we were talking about, the possibilities that I guess maybe the season wouldn't happen or something like that. And so I just went on Twitter while this is going on, and I put a poll up and it said, Buckeye fans, would you accept a loss right now to Michigan this year if it meant that the season would take place normally with no alterations? And the response was, I guess, about what I thought. And it's now it's up to rounding up 90% saying no, they would not accept a loss to Michigan if it meant basically saving the season, while 10% said yes, we would take that loss for the betterment of mankind in college football. And it just goes to show you. Now, I didn't say, would you accept a loss if it meant that it would either lose the game or lose the season. That's not what it was, because people could read it and be like, well, he didn't say that, so maybe you take your chances that, sure, it's a 9-game season or something like that. No, I don't want to lose to Michigan in a 9-game season, and that's their thought process. But I guess some pretty nasty reaction from Buckeye fans. I started writing about it, and the original title of what I was writing was something like, all I did was ask a question and then people were mean to me. But I, eventually changed it up a little bit. But the reactions were pretty strong in favor of screw Michigan and screw college football.
Yeah, if you had said to save the college football season at all, to guarantee that there is a college football season, a normal college football season versus no college football season at all, you might have had at least a closer result. But yeah, if it's a question of, maybe there's a 9-game season instead of a 12-game season, like, no. Frankly, the only surprise there is that the poll was, the 90% was as low as it was. I'm surprised, honestly, it wasn't a little higher. It makes me wonder if either people misunderstood the question or you had Michigan fans in there voting. Those are the two possible explanations I could see.
Well, and most people, I think, read it as if it was either you lose to Michigan or there is no season. And as of right now, there's over 5,600 votes, and there's still 17 hours left in the poll. So you're tracking at about almost 1,000 votes an hour on that. Then I saw our buddy Matt Connolly from the state who covers Clemson. He went ahead and asked that same question, but did it like, Clemson fans, would you be willing to lose to South Carolina in order to save the season? Basically asking, I guess, how I should have. But I was distracted while I was asking mine because I was on a YouTube show. But it was much closer. I think like 47 or 46% of Clemson's fans were like, yeah, I would do that. And you're like, what? Time to move the Clemson South Carolina rivalry way down the rankings, I think.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right now. 56% no football season, 44% lose to South Carolina. And that was, if you could play this season but lose to South Carolina or have no college football season at all, which would you rather? Because that's a different question than what you asked.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it really – I don't know how much that would actually change the results for Ohio State. I can't imagine half of Ohio State people being like, yep, I would rather not. I would rather just see them lose to Michigan rather than not have college football at all.
I'm probably 80-20.
See, I feel like maybe we have a slightly different vantage point on this as people who have something of a financial interest in there being a college football season this year. But, I do wonder if the people who would be willing to punt that are old enough to remember what it's like to live in a world with Michigan fans in a year after Michigan has beaten a competent Ohio State team, because there is a whole generation of people who have no idea what it's like to have an Ohio State team that has a 500 or better record lose to Michigan. And as someone who has lived through that, I can see how people might at least spend some time thinking about that decision.
Yeah, our buddy Smartwater on the message board replied, because I also put it on the board asking, he's like, shame on you, I am still bitter about the 3-3 tie in 1910. So
great follow-up question from @VanGo_0. Now ask Michigan fans, would you rather play a football season or not have a season and avoid playing Ohio State? And I bet you're going to get a 50-50 response there. If you just based on the tone of the comments on tweets about Ohio State recruiting and Michigan recruiting right now, and the general tenor of the Ohio State-Michigan series, there's a lot of resignation, I think, among Michigan fans about this is going to be unpleasant in Columbus this year, and then maybe 2 years from now something will happen. Maybe.
Well, you're right. Like, Michigan fans would be like, so we don't have to play Ohio State? We can the next time we play them, we can do it at home? Yes, just sign me up with a possibly returning starting quarterback. Well, I guess there'd be no season, so there would be no 2020 to build on. But yeah, you'd much rather play Ohio State at home. I even saw G. Scott Jr.'s dad, I believe his name is G. Scott Sr., replied with a GIF saying "Hell to the Gnaw." So this is a guy who, not even an Ohio State fan yet, he's an Ohio State dad who's like, you know what? I don't need to see my son this year. I don't need to see him play this year if it means he's going to lose to Michigan. I'd rather just see nothing. So
I do wonder if there was no Ohio State-Michigan game this year, they would probably play the 2021 game in Columbus and just flip it, right? Ohio State's not going to go 4 years without playing a Michigan game in Columbus. There's no way they're signing up for that. I bet they would have to flip that and have the Columbus games in the odd years and the Ann Arbor games in the even years, which would really, really mess with me. That would really throw off.
Yeah.
But Ohio State's not going to punt a 4-year cycle without a Michigan game. That's not happening.
I did like a reply here from @Las Vegas Buckeye. I need to pray before I can answer this. These decisions should not be made lightly. I got a lot of the Ricky Bobby, don't you put that evil on me response, and plenty of the Michael Scott, no.
Yeah.
So it was, I guess I expected most of this, but it's been pretty overwhelming for something that just came to me real quick, and I typed it out, and then I think I texted you and said, hey, I found some content. I made news. I'm going to go cover me now.
Oh, look at you. You're ready for your own show on ESPN.
Exactly, because for a while their whole cycle was, Stephen A. said this, let's talk about it. And then Stephen A. would talk about what people were saying he was talking about. And it's this beautiful circle of life, if you will. And so in an era, in an age where there is not a lot going on, sometimes it helps that you can create stuff like this. I did see one of the replies was a GIF of the one part in the Avengers where Mark Ruffalo says, "Tony, no," and he's talking to Tony Stark, and it's like, "Tony, no." It's like, well, that's that's pretty good. So it's good to engage and let people voice their displeasure with you, every now and again, I suppose.
It's good to give people something to be upset about these days. They haven't had enough. It's good to put that kind of angst in their lives. I'm glad you're able to play your role in that.
Yeah, that's what I'm here for. I don't just get it at home. It's not like the anxiety and the harsh words, I get that at home. But then, it's good that I can also be there for everybody else as well, to be their virtual punching bag. And, I don't mind it. Do the words hurt? Of course they hurt. Of course they hurt. Can I go outside and relieve like this anxiety? No, I can't. I'll deal with it. I'll put it in a little ball into the pit of my stomach. Eventually, in 4 to 6 months, it'll be an ulcer, and then we'll go deal with it. If we can deal with it, out in public at that point, and I can go yell at strangers out at the park like I like to do, then that'll be great. If that can't happen, I suppose I can yell from the window here at the neighbors, but the cops told me not to do that anymore. So.
And that brings us back to Ohioans buying a record amount of liquor. So really, we've come full circle already.
Full circle. So today was Friday was also our opportunity to talk with Mark Pantoni, who is the Ohio State Director of Recruiting. But his title is much more complicated. It's Assistant Athletic Director, Player Personnel.
Yes.
Yes. And there's a lot of assistant athletic directors in the Ohio State football program. He and Mick Marotti are probably the two most important. By the way, Tom, I don't think we talked about Mickey Marotti announcing his departure from the program.
Yeah, I had in advance of April Fool's Day, I had basically said what if we took the year off, friends? What if we didn't do that and didn't mess with people this year? But they did. That was I can't imagine that many people bought into it that long. I mean, especially given the day, like, you think people are probably kind of have their antenna up anticipating that, but it was a little bit of a dig, I think, at Alabama, because Alabama just lost its strength coach, Scott Cochran. He's now the special teams coach at Georgia. So if you wanted to read that as a little bit of a backhanded shot at Alabama, you could have done that.
I didn't mind this one because it was so clearly obvious that you're not. Plus, it was kind of fun. But the one I did not like, Tom, was Ohio defensive tackle Michael Hall, who is committed to Ohio State, tweeting out that he's transferring to IMG. And, like I said on Mark Rogers today, you can't tease desperate sports writers with even little bits of news like that. You can't put that out there and then come back later and say April Fools. I mean, we're all looking for anything at this point to write about and to get our clicks from, and then you go and do that. And I don't, as I jokingly said on the show earlier today, like I don't know if that's the kind of kid you even want in your class, Tom.
I mean, I think if you write about it, if he tweets it out and you write about it, now he has to do it. Sorry. I mean, it's
legal.
It's legally binding. As soon as we hit publish, it becomes legally binding. So that's on you for not making it clear that you were joking. And so I'm very sorry, but you'll have to tell your parents goodbye, and you'll see him at the end of the football season.
Yeah. Enjoy Florida, sucker. But the reason it was interesting is because there's 3 other Ohio State recruits who are Ohio State is after, who are down at IMG as well. So shoot, now I'm like, you know what? Let's just talk about it like it happened, because you got J.C. Latham down there, and you got 2 other guys down there as well, but it didn't happen. So it was fake, and we'll all move on. We don't need to talk about it. We don't need to talk about who got suckered in, who bought it. We especially don't need to talk about which person alerted the people who got suckered in. that it was an April Fool's joke. We definitely don't need to talk about that, Tom.
No, it's
so
fine.
We can
no, it's fine. It's all good. It's all fine. Because
we're all on the same
anybody. Team here. Yeah, we're all on the same team here. It's fine.
Exactly, but please don't ever fall for that again, Tom.
No.
So, like I said, on Friday we talked to Pantone, who is, like all of us, living his new normal at home, working from home. I don't really know that much has changed for him for certain things, because I always picture those guys, the recruiting department, back in a whack, like in some corner, and they never leave that corner unless there's recruits in town. And so right now there are no recruits in town, so they just, they would be in their corner on texting on their phones and doing all the different things that they need to do. But like most people, he said it's, kind of annoying with the kids around. It was not exactly how he said it, but it's kind of how he meant it. So there is that, but it's a lot of Zoom meetings, texting coaches, and another case of he's just like us.
Right. I mean, I feel for him on the, I don't want to say that it's annoying to have kids around while you're trying to work.
Right.
But.
Is it?
I mean, it's wonderful and it's a blessing, but it can dip a little into your productivity. I think that's maybe how I would phrase it. Mm-hmm. And I get it. Mark Pantone's productivity the last couple of weeks, I don't think there's a big concern about that, because he seems to be continuing to bring in extremely highly touted recruits, and everything seems to be, firing on all cylinders. So maybe his kids are not particularly disruptive, or maybe he's just extremely good at his job. I think my guess, based on the last 8 years or so, is it's probably a good bit of the latter, and that's how you get to be an assistant athletic director. You're extremely good at your job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, the Buckeyes have gotten a number of commitments in the last month, and he said it was the relationships that they had built up prior, just as Ryan Day said, and that's how you get these guys to commit without having visited recently. I'm interested to see what happens when visits are allowed again. And one of the things Pantone said is they will still continue to recruit their commitments as if they are uncommitted. And I think everybody will need to do this, because once the visits are opened back up and you can go see what else is out there, there's always decommitments every year. I think maybe this cycle with everybody, there's going to be a higher percentage. And sure, some guys are going to wait to commit, but as we're seeing, there's plenty who aren't. But once those visits get opened up again, I'm wondering, will we see more decommitments, because now players have more information. They get to see places. I mean, seeing something virtual, like players are taking virtual trips to campuses now, that's fine. But Tom, you're booking a hotel and you're looking at the 360 view. Yeah, it's not exactly the full picture of where you're staying, and that's the same case with these campus visits. And we see it every year. They find something they like better at another place and they decommit. I think we're going to see more this year, not necessarily from Ohio State, though we see that from Ohio State every year. I think overall there's going to be quite a few decommitments.
I think almost certainly everything about this cycle is going to be more unpredictable than a normal year. You're going to have more flux. You're going to have more people decommitting after people sign up and sign on the dotted line. You're probably going to have more people transferring a year in, as just because there's less direct relationship building, less direct contact, and that's just everywhere. And I think that you'll probably have some more decommitments and transfers maybe this year. But where I think this is really going to have an impact is the 2022 class and beyond. Because this is the reason that they're so far ahead in 2021 is because this time last year, they already had a lot of the 2021 kids on campus. Like we saw Kyle McCord at the spring game last year. We saw Legend Cavazos. I mean, not Legend Cavazos. He was a 2020, but there were a number of 2021 kids that J.C. Latham was at a spring practice in 2020. So all the 2021 kids, they've been to campus in Ohio State already. They were here a year ago. So the 2022s, who would normally be in that spot in the recruiting cycle, those guys are now not visiting. So that cycle is going to be pushed back a little bit. You're going to have, this is going to be something that it's going to have different impacts on the different years, but it's going to make a real change to multiple recruiting cycles. This is not something that just as soon as the 2021 class signs, everything's going to be back completely to normal. The 2022 class is already now, for everyone, a little further behind than they would have been under normal circumstances.
And you hope that those 2022 kids are a little bit more patient than previous classes, because coaches will want to see them play, and they're not going to have any spring evaluation periods. There's going to be no camps this year. And the 2021 kids, Pantoni talked about not being able to check off certain boxes that they were planning to check off this spring, either yes or no on guys before they offer. And so if you don't have that, then you have to decide, do you offer now? Do you wait to see them this season, which you may or may not? And so you have to go back to the film again, and it's a lot like what's going to happen with the NFL draft, where there is no combine, or there's no pro days, rather, and you have to rely more on the on-field tape, the game tape, and make your decisions from there. I thought it was pretty hilarious what a story Pantoni relayed with a conversation with Kerry Combs this week, and because they have much more time, and as Ryan Day said, the coaches are doing a lot of evaluation now, which they don't normally do. They leave that to Pantoni in terms of the early stuff. And so the coaches are looking at more 2022 kids now, and Kerry Combs told Pantoni, like, hey, these guys aren't very good. And Pantoni had to remind him, like, they're sophomores. You're looking at sophomore tape. They're like 15 years old. You just came from the NFL, and you've been at Ohio State again, working with Sean Wade and Cam Brown and Seven Banks, future NFL guys. Right now you're looking at 15-year-olds. And so it's a different kind of evaluation. And it's an evaluation that Pantoni that's pretty much all he knows is you see him at these young ages, and you find stuff to like, and you find their positives. And so like Kerry Combs has to be, I think all of the coaches have to be reprogrammed a little bit, looking at these younger kids in terms of what you look for, what you like. And you can't make these broad sweeping judgments like, well, there's no cornerbacks in the 2022 class. These guys all suck. Like, they may not be great right now, but give them a year and maybe they'll be a little better.
Right. Yeah. These are guys who, even if they're, you're a sophomore in high school, so you've got 2 more seasons of high school football, and then a lot of them will possibly take a redshirt year at Ohio State. And, then even as a redshirt freshman, you're not starting. So you're talking about guys who could be 5 years away from being contributors. And, the difference between a 14-year-old and a 19-year-old or a 20-year-old, there's a pretty substantial difference there in terms of height, weight, muscle mass, speed, skills. I mean, all of it. So, yeah, I thought that was hilarious that, the reason these guys don't look like college players right now is because, well, actually, they could be 4 to 5 years away from being college players.
Yeah, they're closer to being junior high players. Like Combs was looking at these guys like, they can't play at Ohio State. Like, well, no, yeah, no kidding. Just give them some time. Calm down a little bit. Take a deep breath and let them mature. And don't just throw these guys out just yet. Eventually, you'll find somebody and they'll be good. One of the other things, and there's plenty that Pantoni had to say, he would like to see some reform in terms of offering kids, because he talks about how some schools have offered 200 or 300 kids, and these are not real offers, and also kids that collect offers who just want to tweet that they've got that offer, but they have no interest in that school, and so they take up resources that way, or they basically lure other schools in to come recruit them. And I don't. He said he had some ideas, but he wasn't sure what the solution is. But when kids think these are real offers, then it puts pressure on. Like how often have we talked about or have we seen when Alabama would come and offer some kids who are on the cusp, Ohio kids on the cusp of getting Ohio State offers, basically forcing Ohio State's hand to either offer this person or run the risk of them getting upset, knowing the entire time that they're not going to commit to Alabama right now. Alabama's not going to accept their commitment. It was for there's some guys there for a while where it just seemed like Nick Saban was offering Ohio kids just to needle Urban Meyer. And so I wonder how much of that is what Pantoni thinks back on when you're forcing people's hands in state, when Ohio State being one of those states that's a little bit slower developing. I don't know either what the answer is, whether is there a limit on offers you can make? Like, are offers binding in some way? I don't know how you limit what they can do, but maybe if players were better educated in terms of, as we talk about in the recruiting world, small letter offers and capital letter offers. The capital letter offer is the real offer. The small offer is, why don't you come to camp and we'll see. Here's your offer. We like you, but we need to see you at camp to really offer.
Right. Yeah. That's I think a distinction that gets lost on people, because you look at, every time we write up an Ohio State commitment and we go like, here's the list of his offers, Alabama is always on that list. Well, I mean, always on that list. Alabama must offer 300 or 400 kids a year, like Pantoni said. I mean, I don't know the answer there as far as how to change that, because it's something that's not. It's not like ethically wrong, because I'm sure that the kids probably know that it's not a committable offer, and from their perspective, it's just, hey, this is cool. I can say I got an Alabama offer, and that that's something that may help bump your if you've got a real impressive offer list, that can bump your rating up a little bit. So from the kid's perspective, it's not necessarily something that's detrimental to the kid, but it's something that for other schools, it's certainly a disadvantage. I mean, like you said, it can put pressure on other schools to offer before they're really ready. And, Alabama, the reason Alabama does that, in case you're not putting two and two together here, if Ohio State offers an Ohio kid, there's a pretty good chance that kid's gonna accept. Ohio State knows that. So if they're not 100% sold, they're not necessarily going to offer until they're 100% sold. So if they're getting rushed into it, then you can end up with a buyer's remorse situation, because there were a couple of kids who Ohio State, waited on last year. And then when they offered, it was like, boom, instant commit, like 15 minutes later. So Alabama, like you said, knows they have the luxury of not waiting, of not immediately having to accept an offer from someone. I wonder if there's something that, it becomes the offer has to be something written, and if it's in writing, then that means that that somehow binds them to a letter of intent. that they have to mail out a letter of intent to someone if they're going to send out an offer or something like that. I don't know. I don't know. Something along those lines is about all you could do, because I don't know how you police it, because it's like a hard cap on offers. Like, I don't know. I don't know. There's no way the NCAA is going to be able to enforce that, is my thought.
Well, and there would have to be some sort of a clearinghouse or whatever where there can only be 150 offers out, or whatever the number is at a time. And so you would have to tell players, like, once you reach that 150 limit, you would have to rescind an offer to hand out another offer, basically.
Yeah, and maybe, like a transfer portal coming in almost.
Exactly, where maybe you tag all of the players you've offered, and there's databases for the NCAA or whatever, even if it's just spreadsheets. But once you've hit that limit and you want to go offer somebody else or 5 other people, you've got to alert these players that, we're pulling your offer. And then you want, well, like what is enough? If you can only sign 25, you would think like 6 times that number. Is that enough? Because you're not necessarily going to need. You don't need to necessarily throw out like 10 offers on receivers or running backs in a given year. Sometimes you do, but yeah, there's so much blanketing of players, and I was talking to. And then Tom, then you're like, well, what about when you're offering young guys, the younger guys, like offering freshmen and sophomores? Is it each class where that it's that same limit? I guess it would have to be, right? Like,
right?
If you're offering,
you'd have to. But I don't think 150 is too many. I don't know that 100 would be too many because, I mean, think about it. Like if you look at the 2021 Ohio State recruiting class, now Ohio State's more than halfway full at this point. But if I gave you 50 names to list, I think you could almost certainly come up with the players who are going to fill out the rest of this class. We don't know exactly who it's going to be,
right.
But I think we have a pretty good sense that it's either going to be this guy or this guy or this guy for the last tight end spot or the whatever. And for 2022. That's obviously further out, but if you gave me 100 names to list, I have a feeling that I could nail probably the majority of the 2022 recruiting class right now. And, as you get a little closer, you're going to have names that you're scratching off that list because they're committed somewhere else or whatever. And then you take those spots and you can fill in the newer names that you have a sense that, hey, maybe this guy's in the picture now. So, I would say 100 is probably sufficient for each individual class. I at this point, I doubt the NCAA is looking to have to add any sort of more enforcement mechanism or add any more personnel, given the financial situation that they and all of their members are finding themselves in right now.
Yeah, I mean, official visits are limited, so maybe you move along those lines and limit who you can offer. One of the things I hadn't really thought about, I was talking with Jim Roth, who is the high school coach at Columbia South, which is where Julian Fleming played. I talked to him this week, about Julian Fleming, and we talked for like 40 minutes or something. And he mentioned that Fleming was getting offers as a true freshman in high school, and offers that early aren't, we saw what happened when Ohio State accepted an offer from Danny Clark as a true freshman. He committed, and then a couple years later decommitted because Ohio State was like, well, you kind of haven't progressed like we thought you would. And that's a lot of freshmen. Julian Fleming turned out okay, but he's getting these offers as a freshman. And one of the concerns once that started happening with the coach was that now this kid's going to get a big head, but it didn't happen. But that's a concern for a lot of coaches because even Jim Roth was like, yeah, I've seen it happen where the players get early offers and they feel like they've made it and they don't need to work as hard. And then by not working as hard and doing what got them that offer, now when the time comes that these offers have to be more serious, the schools that originally offered will be like, well, no, you didn't progress like we thought you would, and so we're going to move on. And it all started because they got those early offers and started to feel really good about themselves, and they started to take it easy. And that's another negative of so many offers, because it deletes the hunger for some guys. And you think back to years and years ago where offers didn't start happening until your senior year, and players stayed hungry, and they were working for these offers, and you're working through your entire high school career. But now you think back to Kenny Guyton, not that he's an example of somebody who didn't take it seriously, but waited too long to commit, and then had offers from Stephen F. Austin, and then Ohio State came, and then he got bailed out by Ohio State, but he had bigger offers, but because he waited to commit, his spot went away. But just throwing all these offers out there, it's there's negatives to it that also impact the players just as they impact the schools and the coaches.
Sure. Yeah. It's it's hard because this is the first time a lot of these kids are. Obviously, the first time the kids are going through the process and the families are going through the process. And if your high school coach has been around for a while, he's probably dealt with this to some degree. But if you are the type of player who's going to Ohio State, odds are you're probably the best player that's gone through your high school in fill in the blank Ohio in your coach's career, or you're one of if you're from a big program, if you're from Massillon, Washington, or you're from one of the big Cincinnati Catholic schools or something like that. Like, okay, you're one of a handful of players that have been at this level in recent years, but this is something that from the kids' perspective, they don't have any expertise, and they may or may not have expertise to rely upon in terms of their high school coach and all of that, and so it's tough. And think back to when you were 15 years old, 16 years old. I mean, I can tell you I did not always make brilliant decisions when I was 15 or 16 years old, and I was not a superstar athlete that had everyone telling me I was amazing. And I can definitely see how that could mess with your head, mess with your work ethic and everything else. So, that's been a very familiar refrain from coaches not liking how much the recruiting process has been sped up. Mm-hmm. But at this point, if everyone else is speeding it up and everyone else is doing it on this certain timeline, you basically don't have a choice. You don't have the option of sitting back and going, well, we'll see. You can't slow play everyone. I mean, UCLA has tried to do that, I think, to some degree under Chip Kelly and be very, very selective with who they offer. And it has, if you check the recruiting rankings, extremely not worked. So that's not really an option. So, this is a system that it seems like no one really loves, but everyone is just kind of stuck doing it this way.
Well, in the first early signing period a few years ago, was it 2018? I suppose. Urban Meyer, is that right? 2018.
I think that's right. Yeah.
Good. And so Urban Meyer all along was like, I don't like it. I don't like the way things have been sped up. But in that press conference of that first early signing period, he was like, I'm complaining, but then he holds up the list of players that they signed. He's like, but obviously this worked for us. I mean, I can't complain too much when we signed the players that we did. And it continues to work for Ohio State, and is one of the reasons they were so far ahead on 2021 kids, because everybody, they get their classes signed early in December, and then all January is just working on the next class and getting a head start. And so, you can only complain so much when it's working. Surely everybody would like it to be a little bit slower so you can handle it better and take it in smaller pieces. But I guess the best programs are going to be the ones that can handle that kind of conveyor belt of everything coming at you. It's being able to piece it all out, delegate it, accomplish all of these tasks that are happening at once. And as we know, some programs, Tom, they aren't up to speed, literally.
Can you provide an example of one of those programs? I'm not sure.
I mean, we don't need to name names, but if you want to name names, we've got time. There's, as you said, UCLA, perhaps Michigan, who is in a bit of a funk right now, and could use maybe. I mean, would a relaxed? I wonder if a relaxed recruiting period would allow them to do better, or if they would just be relaxed with it, and continue to do what they do and just be like, hey, this is so roomy. This is, you start to stretch out like, oh, this is comfortable. Oh, I think I'm going to have a chair nap. This is nice. Whereas
this recruiting cycle has pleats.
Whereas at Ohio State, they're like, well, you're going to slow down. Good. That gives us more time to do this with the recruiting. This guy gives us more time to handle this with the game plan. This gives us more time to do this. Everything we've seen from Jim Harbaugh's recruiting leads us to think that no adjustments would really allow them to overtake or catch anybody else operating with those same adjustments.
Right. There is no well, I mean, they're going to run into the same problems that they have recently, which is they don't have that much to sell right now. Like they have the Michigan continues to be a good school and academically, so they have that to sell. But in terms of development or enjoyable experience of being a football player, like there are plenty of places that are also good academic schools where you're probably having a better experience in terms of being a football player and enjoying your enjoying victories and getting developed for the NFL and all of that. So, and I mean, we've talked a whole bunch, and I'm sure our listeners are tired of hearing us talk about how Michigan has systemic recruiting issues. I'm sure they don't want to hear that anymore. But yeah, I think the systemic recruiting issues that they have there and the operational issues they have there don't get magically solved, regardless of what the recruiting calendar looks like.
Yeah, I asked Pantone today, like, how do you think Urban would be handling this era of you can't do anything? And he kind of chuckled and said, well, it'd be different than what Ryan Day is doing, but obviously they would both be successful in however they handle it. Ryan Day told us that there's no, we're not going to throw Fitbits on their wrists, because if we can't trust them to work on their own, then we don't have the kind of program, we don't have the kind of team that we thought we did. And then I see yesterday or today, Alabama's players are all wearing Apple Watches, so Alabama can monitor everything they do. And then also today, Dabo Swinney came out and said, yeah, we're not going to throw watches on our players. We trust our players. And there's an interesting, I guess, juxtaposition or a comparison between maybe the new school, which is new school of Ryan Day and Dabo Swinney, who are trusting their players that they're not going to throw the latest technology on their wrist. And then there's the old school of Nick Saban's like, we're going to put them Apple Watches on his wrist, and we're going to make them take their salt pills, and we're not going to give them water. And these Apple Watches better show 3 a days on there and all of this. And it's an interesting just comparison between the I think Clemson and Ohio State. I kind of feel like they have bypassed Alabama, but we'll see once Alabama's back on the field. But maybe Day and Swinney are the new age moving past Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time, who eventually is going to have to hang it up, but clearly hanging on for everything he can by trying to make sure he gets everything he can out of his players and monitoring everything. It's a great utilization of technology, but it's something that Day and Dabo weren't interested in.
Yeah, and it is interesting the juxtaposition of Saban compared to the other two, because I mean, obviously there is the idea that Saban is starting to get passed by, and I'm not quite willing to start shoveling dirt on top of Alabama football just yet. They did. I mean, everyone remembers the Tua injury last year, which obviously was kind of the big one, but they had a huge number of injuries before last season. I mean, Dylan Moses got hurt. They had a bunch of injuries on defense. Yeah. They were playing like 3 freshman linebackers at the same point, which, if you throw 3 freshman linebackers out there for Ohio State last year, like, it probably doesn't look quite as good as the defense looked on the field for the Buckeyes last year. So, you take Justin Fields away from that team, you take 3 linebackers away from that, you make them play 3 freshman linebackers. Like, yeah, that's going to look like a team that's not quite ready for the playoffs, probably. So, yeah, I would not write off the Alabama dynasty just yet, but it does seem like you can see the end of the Saban era. I don't think we're at the end of the Saban era yet, but you can sort of start to see it at the end of the tunnel, because you do have young, up and coming coaches who, in terms of, it's hard to argue that Dabo hasn't passed him at this point, and Dabo's younger and going to be coaching longer than Saban is, almost certainly. Lincoln Riley is, it would be great to see them win a playoff game at some point before you started really having them in this conversation too seriously. But Lincoln Riley is kind of up and coming. Ryan Day, it's obviously just been 1 year, but there's no real indication Ryan Day is about to tail off. So, yeah, I think you can. We are not at the end of the Nick Saban era, but you can maybe start to make it out in the distance a few years off.
And we're saying this as Alabama currently has they signed the number 2 recruiting class in 2020, including Bryce Young, the dual threat quarterback from California, the number 2 player in the nation. They had 4 5-star guys last year, and another dozen and a half, 2 dozen 4-star players as I'm scrolling through here. Like they signed 25 players, and only 3 of them were 3-star guys. All right, so
again, this is not like that they're on their way out, and I'm being extremely clear about the fact that no,
yes.
this is not the end of the Nick Saban era, but where you tend to see programs have issues is when they have just constant churn with coordinators. And, think about all the guys who've left Nick Saban's staff. Like, eventually that catches up with you. It caught up with Urban Meyer for a little while. When Tom Herman left, he didn't replace Tom Herman with a Tom Herman equivalent. And when Chris Ash left, you could argue that he did not replace Chris Ash with a Chris Ash equivalent, even if he had the brand name to go with it. And then you get the right coordinators back in place, and it's like, oh, okay, now it's back on track again. We'll see how Ryan Day does with, okay, he had to replace Jeff Hafley this year, so we'll see how that goes. That's the kind of thing that can catch up with you. But honestly, the biggest red flag, this is something we mentioned kind of off the top, Scott Cochran, the strength coach for Alabama, left. That is, if Mickey Marotti leaves Ohio State, that's a big red flag. That if Mark Pantoni leaves, that would be a big red flag. Those guys have stuck around. Pantoni said, today he basically had there was no, I wonder if I should go somewhere else. It was like, no, this, nothing stops this train, basically, was where he was. Okay, there's a new nameplate on the door on the head coach's office, but everything else is staying the same. We're just keeping on rolling. Losing a strength coach like Scott Cochran, that's someone who plays a big, big role in that program. In all the months when the players can't be with the regular coaches, Scott Cochran is running that program. So for him to leave, and that was, all indications were he wants to be a head coach, and so you need to be one of the 10 countable coaches, as an intermediate step between being a strength coach and a head coach. But losing someone like that, that's the kind of thing that can be every bit as devastating to a program and have as much of an impact on a program or more as losing a coordinator and replacing them with an inferior replacement.
Yeah, we talked the last show about comparing Ohio State and Michigan and the gap of the talent gap there. And one of the things I mentioned was that Ohio State's average recruit ranking, on the team, is 265th because of the bottom of the class is always dragged the score down. So the average ranking of each Ohio State player is 265. I'm looking at Alabama's class from last year, or the 2020 class. They have 5 players ranked outside of 209, ranked outside of 265, just 5 players, and 20 players, 6 or 7 players. And the rest is the 17, 18, 19 players are all ranked way ahead of that 265 range where the Buckeyes are. So, Tom, I think Alabama's going to be fine. I know you're ready to move on. But it is strange that we do feel like, speaking for me, I feel like it's like I guess maybe that's just what happens 1 year out of the playoffs. You start to dismiss somebody and you put Dabo up there, and then you see Ohio State was better than Clemson last year, and they should have beaten Clemson. They didn't, but then you put Ohio State up there. You're not going to put Oklahoma up there. You're not going to put Georgia up there. And I guess it's like, well, until Alabama shows us again, even though that's the craziest thing to say, because last year was the first year they didn't make the playoffs of the playoff era. And they're always going to be one of the three favorites, one of the two favorites with Clemson, because Ohio State isn't really there yet in terms of what everybody else views as the top two in college football. Yeah, that's why when it's a top three, then it's Ohio State in there. When it's top two, it's Alabama and Clemson. And now neither of those teams won a national title last year, but when we talk programs, it's not just 1 year. And so I guess if we're not gonna just base things off of 1 year, I guess maybe we should give Nick Saban a little bit more time to prove his relevance.
Can he parlay this Michigan State job into something bigger? I don't know. We'll see. Can't wait.
We will see. Anything else from Pantone? There's still quite a bit. Anything that you saw that you wanted to mention?
Well, I mean, he talked about the fact that players right now for Ohio State are having trouble finding places to train and work out. I mean, and that's going to be an issue for everyone. That's just that falls right into the Ryan Day, like, yep, this is bad for us. Also, everyone else is going through this, so it's bad for everyone, and everyone just kind of has to figure it out. And, I think this is – I saw something from Penn State this week that they think it's going to take 60 days. I think they did a study or talked to an expert and said it probably takes 60 days of preparation to get a team really ready for a game. So in order to be ready to play on September 1st, you probably need to have – people getting back together around July 1st, something like that, to be able to really have people kind of operating at more or less full capacity. And, I don't know that they're necessarily going to have 60 days. Maybe they will. Maybe it'll all work out and it'll be kind of back to normal July 1st and be able to go from there. But, if it ends up being 30 days worth of prep or 45 days worth of prep, this may be a year when you're going to have some weird, funky results at the beginning of the year, and you're going to have, you are accustomed to a certain level of play, and when you're watching an Ohio State, Penn State game, say, or you're watching watching a college football playoff game, you're getting one level of play, and then when you're watching, let's say Illinois and Northwestern play, like you can tell it's just. The play is not quite as good. It's not quite as crisp. It's not quite as technically sound. You may have some games, Ohio State games that are looking a little bit more like, maybe not Illinois games, but, dare I say Ohio State games looking like Michigan games, or Ohio State games looking like, kind of like teams that look like an 11-0 team looking like a 9-3 team, and teams that look like a 9-3 team looking like a 6-6 team. And can you imagine what the 2019 Northwestern offense would look like if they only had like 30 days to get prep for the season? Holy smokes.
Holy God. Can you score negative points? Like, will refs take points away from you?
This is why people in your poll are willing to punt the entire season. Like, Northwestern football, we can't take that chance.
No, please, no. Don't put the Hunter Johnson offense in our faces. Please do not do that. Doug Maurice asked about the 85 scholarship limit, as he does pretty much every year, to get the number out of somebody's mouth, and nobody ever gives it to him other than to say, well, it'll work out. It always does. And the reason he asked this time is, we've talked about it, where the spring practice lets people know where they stand, lets players know where they stand, and if they have a chance at playing, and when they see that they don't, then they know, well, I guess I better go transfer. And so that's not the case this year, so it'll just be from talks and conversations, and they're gonna, even if they even need to have them, because I'm sure players, there's some players know that it's going to be tough to get on the field, but they won't go into the season with 86 or 87 time. I know that's crazy that they'll somehow get down to 85 like they always do. But that was Mark Pantone. He said it's going to happen again this year, just like it does every year. I don't know if we thought that maybe they wouldn't, but yeah, I guess they will.
Yeah, I believe the official phrase is the numbers will work themselves out. They always do. Is that the exact official phrase? I feel like that. If it's not, it should be. Yeah,
That's on the wall at the WAC.
Yeah, you could carve that in stone. Yeah, they're at 87 right now, and that includes Trey Sermon, the running back who transferred it from Oklahoma. That includes C.J. Saunders, who I don't think that we've officially heard that he got a sixth year, but I think we're assuming that he did. And it includes guys like Justin Hilliard, who's got a sixth year, and there are. If you go back and read any of the hey, this is a big spring for this guy kind of articles, those are the guys who really need to have a big spring to kind of prove that they belonged. A lot of them. So without the option of having a big spring like that, those are guys who, are going to be in a tough spot and have some decisions to make, because if you were relying on those 15 spring practices to really prove that you belong and prove that you should have a role on this team, now you're really rolling the dice going into the summer. And, again, they're 2 over right now, and 2 over. There were a lot of years at Ohio State, and I mean, especially SEC teams. There were a lot of SEC teams, 10 years ago. Like Houston Nutt was notorious for being like 8, 10 over. 2 over is there's a better chance that they end up under 85 than really sweating out at the 85 person limit if they're at 87 right now.
One year, Ole Miss signed 37, and he was like, well, what do you want us to do? They're not all coming here. We're going to play some in JUCO. We're going to play some here. And, we're just trying to help the kids. And it's like, yeah, Houston, just trying to help the kids. Now, Tom, you mentioned players were having trouble finding places to work out. I saw on Twitter today that, for instance, like Gavin Cupp and Luke Farrell and Josh Myers, I believe they all live together off campus. Part of their workout entails throwing a dodgeball up on the roof and trying to have it bounce into a garbage can in the lawn. So the workouts are working fine. Everybody's keeping their strength up and keeping their conditioning up. So I know Pantoni thinks players are having issues. Based on what I saw today, no issues. And also from other players doing some bottle flipping and some Rube Goldberg machines, there's going to be no concerns when these players get back into camp. They're going to be in perfect shape. Don't you people worry.
Yeah, my takeaway from that is that Michael O'Shaughnessy, who's a walk-on backup punter, based on his Rube Goldberg machine, I think he's got to be on the Ray Guy Award watch list this year for sure. That was impressive. There was a bunch of like, Pete Werner had a shot into a pool basketball hoop or something like that from like across the lawn, and Ryan Day's kid had some impressive stuff. But man, I think Michael O'Shaughnessy is he needs to be on some award watch list for sure after that performance.
Yeah, he is the guy to beat right now. Pantoni today said on Friday the average ACT at Ohio State right now is 29. And so when they're recruiting players, they have to ask themselves whether that recruit can handle the academic strain. And so they have this large pool of players that they're recruiting, and then the academics eliminates a number of those guys. And I know that's only, we thought that was only a thing that Michigan does, but it turns out that it happens in other places as well.
What?
And so I know. So what they
do
is they
first online classes now having to learn in college. What is this?
I was surprised.
That's not the Ohio State that I went to. I can tell you that.
I would not be getting into this Ohio State. Not on my first ACT attempt. That is for sure.
Yeah, I was from SAT country, not ACT country. So I always have to Google the scores. An ACT composite score of 29 puts you in the 92nd percentile. So if you are an SAT person, that's the equivalent of about a 1350 to a 1380. So that's that is the standardized testing version of the Fahrenheit to Celsius conversion that I always kind of go, I think I kind of know that's good, right? Yeah, There are a lot of people who I went to Ohio State with who probably would not. We all would have been at Ohio University together.
Yeah, I would have been at BG probably. Taking the ACT, I didn't have any math like either the semester or the year before or the quarter before I took the ACT, so I kind of had forgotten what math was. And I think I ended up getting like a 5 or a 6 on the math portion of the ACT, which is out of 36, I believe, in each section. So I can do the math on that one. That was not very good. That was the only math that I can do. So what they'll do is the transcripts will eliminate plenty of players. They also look at I thought it was interesting, the absences and the tardies, because that will also tell them the kind of work ethic of the player. And then, you said you want to make the pool as small as possible, that once you've got all these players that you think are good enough to be Ohio State Buckeyes, then you start having to eliminating people because you can't sign them all. And so I thought that was an interesting look at the process in terms of, it's crazy, but they still look at grades. That's like, how do you expect to win a Big Ten title if you're worried about academics?
Counterpoint, but what about Cardale Jones's tweet from a million years ago?
And there you go. I mean, he's right. They didn't come here to play school. They came here to play football. And sure, now he is a college graduate who had to play a lot of school. But, I don't know if I like the stigma of Ohio State as a learning school.
We just did a tournament. We just did a 64 team bracket, and how far studying in the library got? First round, eliminated. Like that was a game that was a game that was lopsided enough. Like CBS cut away from that game before halftime and went to other action, more competitive games.
That one that poll probably elicited as much anger as my poll today. Like people are like, study in a library. What are you, an idiot? Screw you. How dare you?
Studying in the library was right around Shamrock towing on the popularity in that tournament. So yeah, I think that you know what, that's fine. We're all functioning adults, so Ohio State did its job. So there you go.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Tom, anything else before we wrap it up? Anything else you wanted to touch on from Pantone or anything else today?
I think we're good, and we have I think decided to try and do. You may have noticed you're getting 2 podcasts in the span of about 24 hours. So we are trying to do a little more and maybe give you a few more, maybe shorter shows. Because I think the feedback we have gotten has been, hey, it's kind of nice to think about stuff that's not the stuff that's going on, and just kind of shut your brain off and listen to 2 idiots try and make each other laugh for a while. So we will probably try and do a few more of these, and we'll do some maybe a listener question show, and we have some other show topics that we've kind of got coming up just to go get out of your house, throw your headphones in, go get some fresh air, exercise, and it's probably going to do you some good and give your brain a little break.
Yeah, because the cops don't like it when you just sit at your window and yell at the neighbors.
Let me write that down.
Go ahead and take note of that. So we want to thank you all for listening. We do appreciate it. Hope you are all hanging in and staying in. But like Tom said, if you're going to go out, make sure you're listening to the podcast. I think that's what he's saying. If you want to go out and go hang out, just make sure you're taking the podcast. Is that right, Tom? You're telling people to go do stuff. Just make sure they're listening.
Yeah, I would say, download it, listen to it, then maybe download it again, listen to it again. Maybe it'll be better the second time. I don't know. Only one way to find out.
Is it okay to listen to the show inside a house?
It is. Here's a thought. Listen to it on your phone while you're out walking. Then take your spouse's phone, download it on their phone, listen on their phone in the house. See, maybe one is better, and then switch. Do it the other way another time, sort of as a control group. Like maybe their phone is better, maybe your phone is better, maybe it's being inside that's better. I don't know. Only one way to find out. Really follow the scientific method here.
Exactly. Or just ask Alexa. Say, Alexa, can you play Buckeye Weekly? Or, you know, what we could also do, Tom, is have a podcast of soothing noises for when people sleep, like Homer did for Marge with the soothing sea noises.
Pew.
Caw, caw.
Aye, matey.
We are two idiots who just try to make each other laugh. So thank you all for listening. Take care of each other. Stay healthy. And we will talk to you later.
Well, she threw away the motel key. I wish it never meant nothing to me. Say you will, now say you will. Oh yeah. Say you will, now say you will. If you tell me that tomorrow's alright, we could steal a car and leave tonight. Midnight, porch light. I had to see you 'cause I know things just haven't been right. This feeling's getting stronger. I can't take